Good morning, good evening, or whatever time it is for wherever the globe may find you. Today, I've done an unreasonably deep analysis into every single book that every White Lotus character is reading in season 1 and what that says about their character and the plot going forward. Basically, I just mean foreshadowing, or I don't know, I've only covered that with some of the books. You'll see what happens. Anyways, I don't think I've put this much amount of effort into literally anything that I've ever done once in my entire life. I did so much research and reading for this that I likely wouldn't have done for a school project or my career. This is the only thing that's been occupying my mind for the last 2 weeks, and now it's here on a plate for you to enjoy. So please enjoy. I don't know how copyright works on this app, so I'm just gonna do it myself. I want to run through a couple of things real quick before we get started. Is that this video operates under the condition that you already watched The White Lotus, and if you haven't, that's fine. I just want to let you know 2 things, okay? Number 1, this video contains a modicum amount of spoilers. I'm not gonna be giving away everything, but be forewarned. And number 2, it's not like this video is gonna be completely intelligible if you didn't watch The White Lotus season 1. I'm just saying that I'm not gonna give you that background of what the characters are and what they stand for unless it's like directly applicable to the book that they're reading. So that's all. Just a little disclaimer moment. Just wanted to let you know. Perhaps the most obvious place to start is with the characters whose books are addressed outright on screen. When I saw the 2 girls, Olivia and Paula, reading Freud and Nietzsche, I was like, okay, I really don't think that these girls would be the type of girls to read Freud and Nietzsche, but maybe I'm just making assumptions about them that I don't know. I think Mike White is great at subverting expectations. At the same time, I didn't know who Mike White was prior to watching this show. Anyways, I was just assuming that my expectations were being subverted, but then there was that scene with Olivia and Paula and Shane at the pool when Shane was like, "Are you guys actually reading those books?" And they're like, "No, we hired a book stylist." So I was like, okay, maybe I was right. The fact that the books were chosen by the stylists but not the girls themselves so that they could appear a certain way kind of fits for Olivia and Paula. They seem like the type to listen to the Red Scare podcast and then the day after interject with 3 different funny quotes from Dasha while they're just trying to eat with their families. Maybe not Paula so much as Olivia, but you get the point. Even though the White Lotus script writes it off as there's no deeper meaning to the books than that, I argue that there is still something to that. I mean, I'm sure when they had the show, they hired a book stylist to choose specific books for each of these characters that would apply to them. You know what I'm saying? So it might be a little like, wait, at the audience. I don't know. Everything put in the show is intentional. Every detail has already been thought out. So I think we should go pry in places they don't want us to be looking. In one of the first scenes of the pool with Rachel and also Paula, Olivia Mossbacher is reading The Portable Nietzsche by Friedrich Nietzsche. It contains 4 smaller stories/essays, which include Twilight of the Idols, The Antichrist, Nietzsche contra Wagner, and Thus Spoke Zarathustra. First, I'll quickly address what each of these essays/stories are about, and then we'll dive into how that applies to Olivia specifically. Twilight of the Idols opens with a foreword and then 44 postulations and thoughts from the mind of Nietzsche. He has a clear sense of humor and sarcasm, and honestly, like, this first part kind of reminded me of a bit like that one note that I have in my notes app that's titled Think, Thought, Think, and it's just every single thought that I've ever thought, kind of not really connected, very discombobulated in my opinion, but I don't know, that's just me. Then it follows with just a lot of criticisms of philosophy of the past and how that has affected philosophy of the present. In The Antichrist, Nietzsche has a lot to say about organized religion and how the concept of a Christian God is a paradox in and of itself. He says, like, the only positive religion that's resulted in the past couple 100,000 years is Buddhism, due to its thesis of a struggle with suffering rather than a struggle with sin. There are a lot of interesting thoughts about religion in here, and I don't know. If you want to go and read it, you can, and then you can see where you stand with Nietzsche on that front. It's a lot. In Nietzsche contra Wagner, Nietzsche lists a lot of criticisms that he has against one specific musical composer by the name of Richard Wagner. He opens with a preface saying that he didn't mean to take out all of his anger on Wagner, and then completely demolishes him in the paragraphs next. It's just so silly. I don't know. There's so many quotes and phrases like, "Wagner belongs only to my diseases," and it just gets more gruesome from there. And I don't know why you would assume this was personal. Like, it's not like Nietzsche fell in love with this one woman and then literally had to go to war, specifically that of the Franco-Prussian kind, and then when he returned from war, he found out that the woman that he was in love with was married to Richard Wagner. Like, it literally has nothing to do, like, I have no idea, like... In Thus Spoke Zarathustra, Nietzsche takes a fictional approach in his writing and speaks through the voice of this prophet of a main character that he has to tell everybody that God is dead and that this Superman or Overman has taken over. It basically just depends on what kind of translation that you're reading. I'm just going to stick with Overman because that's the one that I saw that was most common. But what this Overman is a person that has completely surpassed human nature, so much to the point that they're not man anymore. They're kind of a person between man and God. But in this fictional world, when that message spreads, people kind of go crazy. It's crazy. A lot of this was reduced to hell, but all this to say that Nietzsche has this biting sense of humor and also a wavering grasp of morality because people think differently on what is good and evil. Nietzsche himself, he's just really confused. He has no idea what is good and evil himself. So yes, the White Lotus script claims that Olivia and Paula's books have nothing to do with their characters, but let's look at Olivia through the lens of Nietzsche, shall we? If we were to examine her sense of morality throughout the show, we would kind of see that, well, she doesn't really have any. Sure, she seems to care about how the system of capitalism doesn't really benefit those at the bottom of the barrel, but at the same time, she's at the top. So who really cares? She still tries to get what she wants, including Paula's love interest. Kai, it's this wishy-washy sense of morality that we see exemplified in Nietzsche's work that is completely represented in Olivia. We can see this with the time that Kai tries to steal jewelry from her mother's safe, which is something that was orchestrated by Paula. But the moment that helping underprivileged people hurts her, she backs out. Okay, and then give her another moment to think she forgives Paula. But the thing is, I think that she only forgave Paula because she wants to keep her in her life, not because she suddenly decided that she wanted to apply her own beliefs of wealth redistribution onto her and her own family. You know what I'm saying? Nietzsche notes this dichotomy within humans, and Olivia serves as its paradigm in the show. So I'd say her book was fitting. It's also worthy to note that while Nietzsche and Wagner were in love with the same woman, so were Olivia and Paula, basically. I mean, okay, Olivia wasn't really in love with Kai as much as Paula might have been, but she did try to steal, literally all of Paula's prospects. There's something there, and I feel like it might be a little nudge into what happens later in the season, I don't know. Perhaps this is all hand-waving, but isn't all of literary analysis ever? Paula is reading The Interpretation of Dreams by Sigmund Freud. It was at this point in making the video that I was really getting tired of reading psychologists and philosophers, so I kind of gave up halfway through. Think I'm terrible? I don't care. If anyone's heard of the man more recently, he's been hailed as the guy that wanted to fuck his mother. I mean, that's a gross reduction of everything that he's done in the world of psychology, but at the same time, it was probably true, so, who really cares? Nonetheless, he was the father of psychoanalysis, so we can at least thank him for getting the train running, if, literally nothing else. In this book, Freud introduces the idea of analyzing the content of dreams, saying that they are all wish fulfillments of the dreamer, even those that are nightmarish. He says that those needs, a little bit more of analyzing, I guess you could say. And he also suggests that people sometimes have this masochistic desire to be stressed, and that can manifest in dreams. And it is also in this book that he introduces the idea of the Oedipus complex that he's so famous for. So obviously, this man got a lot of things wrong. Don't take everything that he says or everything that I've introduced to you about what he says to heart and apply it to your own life. I suggest some journaling or something. I heard that it's introspective, it's probably healing. Go with that. But essentially, a dream is a wish fulfillment, and that's what we're going to be working off of for the sake of this book. I was sitting there for quite a while trying to figure out how the interpretation of dreams would apply to Paula, because as far as we know, she doesn't really have a sexual inclination towards her father, so I couldn't really take the easy way out. But then I realized, with a little bit of help from my male companion, that's for my mother, Paula isn't like everybody else there. Paula was the one person who was not able to use her own money to go on the trip and visit the White Lotus. Paula is well off, enough to attend the same school as Olivia, but compared to the Mossbachers, she's nowhere near that level. I think it's also important to note that she is mixed race, which only furthers divide between her and the whole party that she was invited to join the trip with. For Paula, the whole trip is a wish fulfillment, if you will. This is likely one of the only times she'd be able to have such an expensive experience away from her family and the real world, simply due to her proximity to the Mossbachers, and damn it if she's going to spend it how she wants to. She gets to vacation at a beautiful place, she gets to have a fling with this island boy, and she can spend it all in a dreamy, drug-induced haze if that's what she so chooses to do. Do you see what I mean about this environment that's far away from the real world, where you get to live out all your fantasies and nothing really seems real, and then you come back and you're like, oh, it's over? She tries to keep the fling all in her own little bubble, in her own little world, because if anybody were to impede on it, perhaps Olivia trying to steal her man, then it'd be like she was waking up. back in the real world. And that pattern of behavior from her friend is pretty common actually, so she tries to keep the dream in her own headspace, and it's not really much of a surprise that her and Kai are always meeting up at night when she's supposed to be sleeping. So now she's like dreaming with her eyes wide open. You know what I'm saying? Obviously, all dreams have to end at some point, and since Paula wasn't really good at keeping Kai to herself and also protecting Kai from the whole Mossbacher jewelry heist, then it ended a bit more prematurely than it could have. So she exposed her dreams to the real world, Mossbachers, and then it all fell apart. So take this as advice, kids. Keep your dreams to yourself and move in silence. The moment I knew I wanted to make this video is when I saw Rachel read My Brilliant Friend in this show. I was watching it with my mom at the point, and I turned to her and I was like, oh, she would so read that book. And then I started thinking about the other characters. So this is kind of like the foundation of everything. Book 1 in the Neapolitan novels is My Brilliant Friend. Currently 79 years old, Elena Ferrante is one of the most well-respected authors of our time, many postulating that her works are probably going to become classics in the future, and that's not too far off considering how well-received they are, all of the stage adaptations and screen adaptations, you know. Rachel calls herself a writer. Of course her work is journalistic, but I'm sure she desires to write something greater than the BuzzFeed-style articles that she's normally assigned to, so I'm not surprised that she would reach for an author like Elena Ferrante, who is so highly praised. One common thread connecting all of her work are these multi-dimensional female characters. That's definitely something that Elena Ferrante is known for, and I don't know, perhaps as Rachel is reading My Brilliant Friend, she could become a little bit frustrated with the fact that she herself has been feeling flat ever since she entered into her own marriage. But that's just some surface level thoughts that we can dive into deeper when we consider My Brilliant Friend. Elena versus Lila. This book follows two girls that have been friends since childhood. They both love and resent each other at the same time, which is one of their qualities that Ferrante would probably claim as the hallmark of female friendship. Because of her family's higher social standing, Elena gets more opportunities, whether that be getting into the right school, being able to go into writing, etc., even though she believes that Lila probably has more of a capable mind than she. Lila was not able to go to a good school since her family pulled her in to help with their business. There's this great quote from Elena that I want to read. Money gave even more force to the impression that what I lacked, she had, and vice versa, in a continuous game of exchanges and reversals that now happily, now painfully, made us indispensable to each other. And I just have to say, does that not exactly describe Rachel? Okay, so there are two different ways that I think we could think about it. Number one, on the trip, Rachel is struggling with the idea of continuing to advance herself career-wise, even though her new husband Shane is telling her that he is happy to provide for all of her financial needs. In Shane's eyes, a career for Rachel is unnecessary since he already has the money, but in Rachel's eyes, she wants to be able to provide for herself just in case anything were to happen. Also, she wants to have something to her. I think that's what's most important. Something to her other than just her appearance or her ability to provide sex in a marriage. Unfortunately, due to her new social standing and the hint at her poor writing and research abilities, which was seen in the scene between her and Mrs. Mossbacher, all she has is money. Not talent, not intelligence, not depth, just money. In this case, Rachel is Elena. If we think back to the quote in My Brilliant Friend, we see that Elena thinks that her friend Lila is in possession of intellectual wealth, whereas she herself is in possession of material wealth. She wishes that she had that, just like Rachel does. Perhaps Rachel's new money is inhibiting her from greatness. But a possible second interpretation deals with the dichotomy between Shane and Rachel. In this case, Shane would be Elena and Rachel would be Lila. In comparison to Rachel, I'd say Shane is pretty lacking in the areas of writing, but boy does he have the money. Rachel at least has a passion for writing, so that speaks for itself. Shane has not had to work hard once in his life. Whenever he comes to an issue, one of his first resorts is to call his mommy, whereas Rachel has had to learn the ropes for herself and work to get money, much like Lila working for her family. Now Rachel is dealing with this sort of cognitive dissonance, grappling with the fact that she no longer has to support herself in order to live a comfortable life. I'm sure that if Lila were thrown into a similar position, she'd kind of feel the same way. So that's all I have there. It's kind of up to personal preference which one you'd like to believe, or maybe there's something completely different that you see in the book that I don't see. But that's my interpretation. I'm editing right now. I don't know why I said that like that, but just cut to the next. Not very surprised that Cornell business major frat boy who likely got accepted because his parents endowed a library in their name thought that Blink by Malcolm Gladwell would be a nice poolside read. And that's all I have to say for this one. Okay, let's go to the next one. I'm just kidding. Malcolm Gladwell is best known for his works colliding psychology with social sciences, oftentimes touching on aspects of the business world, which is why so many business boys love him so much. Talking to Strangers is one of the newer ones, and you've probably seen that on shelves if you've walked into Barnes & Noble in the past couple of years. His books are very accessible. You know, it's fun to read about people's behaviors and the rippling effects that it has on society or whatever. The full title of the book is Blink, The Power of Thinking Without Thinking. That's pretty Shane, don't you think? The center focus of it is gut feelings and snap judgments that we make as humans due to our rapid cognition. And in the beginning of the book, we get a little bit of insight into how that applies to the world of art. Some dealer had presented a very rare ancient Greek statue to be given to the J. Paul Getty Museum in California, but its quality was suspiciously intact, which made those at the museum assume that it wasn't really authentic. Upon checking with the original dealer, he presented them the proper forms, and it seemed it was real. They also discovered that there was a layer of calcite around the statue, which was another sign pointing towards its authenticity. However, multiple art historians were brought in to insert their opinion on the matter, and upon viewing it for no longer than just a couple of seconds, they said that it was fake. They couldn't say why, they said it just is. Okay, well, they have all this other evidence after what turned into years of analysis, so what does it matter? Turns out the documents were forged. Turns out the piece was just an amalgamation of a bunch of other Greek statues. Turns out that you can create a layer of calcite around something in just a few years and not over centuries. So it seems like those experts do have something to them. Thin slicing is the term that Gladwell coins for being able to gauge a fact about something really quickly without having to think too deeply about it. This seems to come from our subconscious. I read another book called Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman, and it seems like this fast thinking is associated with our adaptive unconscious, which was obviously developed through evolution as our ability to make quick decisions helped us survive. The book Blink also addresses how poorly people understand their own feelings and desires, which is best represented through polls. That's used as evidence in the book. People are able to make decisions, but upon being asked why, they often have difficulty explaining that. If we think about thin slicing in the terms of Shane and Rachel's relationship, we see that they got into a whirlwind of a romance, going out together, having fun. He proposes, and there are all these wedding plans, and now they're on their honeymoon, and they have to sit down with each other and realize this is a person that I'm going to spend the rest of my life with. As Rachel thinks more and more about the idea of staying in this marriage, she feels restricted. Rachel's a bit like those historians that spent years analyzing the statue, focusing on the wrong things to use as evidence for her point and coming to the wrong conclusion every time. Shane, on the other hand, doesn't give it much thought at all. In a blink, he thinks, yeah, this is the one beautiful woman who can stick by my side. Not once does he question it. He is more like the expert in this case. And this is not to say that Shane is right, per se, and thinking that their marriage is going to last long. I'm just saying that we all make these rapid judgments, and that varies from person to person. Thinking about it further tends to make that rapid decision crumble to the ground. What we can examine more deeply in terms of Blink and Shane is how poorly people understand their own feelings and desires. Just like a lot of people are not able to describe why they make the rapid judgments that they make, Shane is not really able to tell Rachel why he chose to marry her. Sure, he says that he loves Rachel, and maybe in his mind, like, his brain is telling him to think these things. But what is special about her, in Shane's mind, apart from literally any other woman that would agree to marry him within that span of time that she did too? And if he truly loved and cared about her, he would put her first. Like, sure, he likes the role that Rachel is filling as a wife, but would he choose her in a room full of women, given that that woman would also play that part? Do you know what I'm saying? I don't think he would have done that if he knew the reason behind his feelings and desires. And I like to use one last piece of evidence from the show to support my point, and that is Shane's obsession with the pineapple suite. So they come to vacation at the White Lotus, and they're given the wrong room. He says that his honeymoon is going to be all messed up now, but Rachel insists that it's okay if they just choose to look at the bright side. Really, it's not his honeymoon that's at stake. But that's all that Shane tells to Armand, that's what he tells to his mother on the phone, to his travel agent. But really, if Rachel's fine with the room, then his honeymoon is going to be just fine as well. Really, what he wants to maintain is his sense of control. He doesn't really want the pineapple suite to make sure that his honeymoon is just fine. You know what I'm saying? So there's another example of how Shane is kind of not really able to explain his reasoning behind his rapid judgments. Don't mind the scene change. We're on day 2 of filming right now. I promised myself that I would just do it on a regular day and get dressed in the same exact clothes so that none would be the wiser, but I cannot resist. I just have to continue. I don't know what's wrong. I just have to continue this. Anyways, the remainder of the books in the season are all ones that Olivia and Paula have been reading, and since we already covered their characters with the 2 other books, I'm just gonna try to like rapid fire go through these. I'm gonna see how well I can rapid fire go through these because I know that there's a lot of stuff that I want to say. I'm gonna try to keep it condensed for the sake of your time. For the sake of your enjoyment, so you're welcome. In Sexual Personae, author Camille Paglia looks at art throughout the centuries, whether that be Michelangelo's The David or the music of Madonna through a sexual lens, to try to prove her thesis that basically is sex is a natural part of human nature, and if repressed, what results is violence. The book's divided into 2 parts, the latter half being the Dionysian world view. It is in this part that Paglia notes the divide between an irrational and spontaneous worldview defined by the Greek god Dionysus, who happens to be the god of wine and pleasure, versus that of order and restraint defined by the god Apollo, who's most well associated with the sun. And she takes the stance that the Western world follows this Apollonian worldview, so restrained, I guess you could say. That only scratches the surface of what she covers in this book, but it's what we will be using for our intents and purposes. A lot of people disagree with Paglia's takes on this, but nonetheless, her work forces you to sit and think, at least, about your own opinion on the matter. In the sense of Olivia, I like to use this quote as a jumping off point. Eroticism is mystique, that is, the aura of emotion and imagination around sex. It cannot be fixed by codes of social or moral convenience, whether from the political left or right. I'd like to tie this sense of sexuality devoid of moral regulation to Olivia's recurring pattern of behavior of going after all of the men that Paula is interested in. Of course, this is something that we can probably all agree is wrong, right? Yeah, all of you. But after seeing with our own eyes her trying to go after Kai on screen, she clearly doesn't think there's much wrong in it. Perhaps a lot of Paglia's perspective on how the Western world is restraining her from expressing her sexuality aligns with how Olivia thinks. Maybe Olivia is even getting reinforcement from reading this type of literature, thinking that, oh, well, she's not in the wrong for pursuing and desiring Paula's prospects. This is just how the Western world thinks, and why think with a closed mind? Paula is the one with the closed mind. I feel like if we looked a bit deeper into this book, we would find a world of other perspectives and how they would apply to Olivia, but for just scratching the surface of the thesis, I think it fits. In Wretched of the Earth, Fanon examines the negative effects of colonialism, urging the world to question the possibility of wealth redistribution, and also whether or not violence is a necessity in bringing about change, which he makes clear cannot be defined by either reform or improvement, but rather a complete uprooting of the old system and an establishment of a new one. Now, this is just handed to us on a plate. Actually, I might qualify it more as a slap in the face. Even if you're a complete imbecile, you would recognize the whole colonialism plotline if you watched White Lotus Season 1. And as a White Lotus guest, Paula was at the center of it all, so I find it very fitting that she's choosing to read some more on the topic after seeing some real-world applications. Or, like, having sex with those real-world applications. Alright. That was a low blow for a joke. His name is Kai. I'm sorry. After meeting with Kai every night during her stay at the White Lotus, Paula learns more and more about how the hotel had come to the land, claimed it as their own, and forced the people living there to decide. Did they want to take jobs there to support themselves, or did they want to remain distant from the company and stay true to their own values? Kai was one of those people whose decision to work for the hotel caused strain between him and his family. It's difficult for people who are oppressed to be able to make a decision that is completely on their own volition because they probably don't have the ability to. However, Paula finds herself in the seat of privilege, so she decides, okay, maybe I can help him out. It's likely that her digestion of books like this prompted her to try to help Kai steal the Mossbacher jewelry. Another one for Paula. Usually the girls are reading in sets together, but Paula has one more book on screen than Olivia does, as far as my knowledge goes. And in Gender Trouble by Judith Butler, we get a deep dive into sexuality and gender, specifically how gender is currently viewed as a binary in society, be that male or female. I was watching some of the insider videos of the behind the scenes of the White Lotus, and Olivia's actor, Sydney Sweeney, was explaining how Paula feels as though she's pulled between 2 binaries, that of the rich, lavish life of the Mossbachers and that of the humble backgrounds of Kai. She then goes on to say that Paula keeps spending time with Kai because she feels more comfortable with him, and as someone who lies kind of in the middle road between each of these parties' social standing, it makes sense that Paula would be more comfortable with somebody who was below her. Perhaps for similar reasons why Olivia wants to keep Paula around. She is below her. But that's just a theory. Nonetheless, we can make the deduction that instead of gender, the binary that more fully applies to Paula in the White Lotus is that of upper and lower class. Finally, in the airport scene, Olivia is reading Écrits by Jacques Lacan, which is a collection of essays and writings from Lacan that center around this idea of a subject, which is inside each person but is different than the person themselves. Apparently, this subject is what drives unconscious desires that are not fully understood by the individual. This sounds very similar to what we looked at with Shane's book, Blank, this concept of not being able to understand ourselves. And I'm sorry, I just have to address this theory. I just have to. I'm gonna do it with this book, and I just have to, okay? Many of us White Lotus watchers, after watching season 1, gathering all the scenes, all the details, postulated that Olivia was gay. Specifically for Paula. Some supporting evidence could be Olivia's defensiveness for her grandfather when her dad found out that he died from AIDS, therefore he was gay, or Olivia's little brother Quinn making a remark about lesbian noises, but more importantly, the nature of her relationship with Paula. The two are very close. Where I'm going to work in Olivia's choice of book Écrits with this is by saying that Olivia seems to keep sabotaging all of Paula's relationships, but does she understand why? Paula claims that this is happening because she just wants everything that Paula has, but would it be too far off to say that perhaps she just wants Paula all to herself? There is probably an element to herself that Olivia does not quite fully understand, and perhaps her advocacy for LGBTQ plus individuals and her obsession with Paula is all from something that she's not even able to identify from this subject of herself. Even if you don't quite agree with that in particular, I still think it's enough to say that Olivia doesn't quite understand why she keeps ruining things for Paula. I mean, there was a scene midway in the season where she comes up to her friend and she's like, I'm not gonna steal your boyfriends anymore. And then shortly after, she flirts with Kai. Why? She's so morally gray because she does not understand her own unconscious desires, which points back to her whole Nietzsche argument. So. Much like Fanon's Wretched of the Earth, Paula is reading another book discussing the effects of colonialism, but what differentiates this one from the last is that it focuses on effects not just on the colonized, but also on the colonizer. What are these effects, you ask? Let me read this quote for you real quick. Colonization works to decivilize the colonizer, to brutalize him, in the true sense of the word, to degrade him, to awaken him to buried instincts, to covetousness, violence, race hatred, and moral relativism. Moral relativism, again with the Nietzsche, and by extension Olivia, and then by extension the Mossbachers, maybe? I won't go into depth here because the topic of colonialism is pretty similar than how it was handled in Wretched of the Earth, and it still applies in similar ways with Paula, especially in terms of her relationship to Kai. I'm not surprised that she's still interested in reading on the topic because she seemed like the only one in the entire cast of guests that was actually bothered by how the people living on that land had to perform for them and work for the hotel. Paula seems like the type of person to act on these beliefs, much unlike Olivia, who will hold them but ultimately do minimal to help. And of course, that is largely juxtaposed with the parents of the Mossbacher family, who challenge Olivia and Paula with the idea of having to give up their own state of comfort to help those who have less than them. If nothing else, at least these colonizers are aware of their unwillingness to change, but Olivia pretends not to be one of them, even though really she is. But that is all that I have for this video. I hope that you enjoyed. I hope that you learned a lot. I hope that you have your own little thoughts circulating in your brain about how these books could be applied to the White Lotus characters. And if you do, let me know, because there's definitely something that I could have missed or something that could be spun a different way. So that's all that I have for you folks. See ya and good night.